Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to Unacademy, your one-stop destination for UPSC Civil Services preparation in the English medium. So welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. But before we begin, we have a very important announcement. Today, that is on the 27th of January at 7 p.m, Sarmad Sir shall be conducting an exclusive workshop, and this is an opportunity for you to get complete guidance on how to crack CSE 2025. So without fail, register for the workshop by using the link provided in the video description. With this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by first looking at the topics that I have chosen from the Delhi edition of The Hindu. Today I have chosen 8 important articles. There are 3 articles that require a detailed analysis from a mains point of view, and we have 5 more articles that are relevant for the prelims examination. So let's take up these discussions one by one and let's ensure that this is a comprehensive discussion. Because the whole idea behind the Hindu analysis is to help you cover current affairs and ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspapers again. So if you're benefiting from this initiative, do let us know with your comments, press the like button, share the video with other aspirants, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. So let's begin with the first topic. Today we have 3 articles across the Hindu newspaper that deals with India-France relations. In fact, yesterday I had given a small introduction to this topic. So today let's pick up this important development and discuss the topic in complete detail. India-France relations is in news because French President Emmanuel Macron had been invited as the chief guest for India's Republic Day celebrations. Yesterday, I explained the significance of this event. The chief guest, who graces India's Republic Day celebrations every year, is carefully chosen by the Ministry of External Affairs. Every year, we invite a foreign dignitary, a foreign head of state or head of government. And this is a symbolic gesture by India. It's a symbolic move to signify to the other country that we will prioritize our ties with that country for the coming year. So for 2024 Republic Day celebrations, it was French President Emmanuel Macron who had been invited. So he visited India on a 2-day visit, and he met with Prime Minister Modi at Jaipur, held a roadshow as well, held key discussions, and several key agreements were signed, and then traveled to Delhi to attend the Republic Day parade that was yesterday. So in this context, let's take a look at India-France relations. What were the key agreements that were signed? And it's important to examine the history of the relationship as well, because we are marking the 25th year of the establishment of a strategic partnership between India and France. 25 years ago, on the very same day, then French President Jacques Chirac had been invited by India as the chief guest for the Republic Day celebrations. It was in 1998 that India-France established a strategic partnership, thus elevating their relations. And this year we are marking the 25th anniversary of this. So it's only befitting to again invite a French leader to grace the occasion, as it gives an opportunity to both the countries to step up their close strategic ties. And also note that France was one of the first major powers with whom we established a strategic partnership. Establishing a strategic partnership has great relevance in international relations. Countries which are very close to each other, countries which have strong relations across several sectors and domains, they are the ones who establish a strategic partnership. Usually, such a relationship will be defined by very strong defense security ties, accompanied with close relations in many other sectors and domains. And the advantage of having a strategic partnership is that if there are any issues in one sector or one domain, it won't affect the larger relationship in the other domains. So India has strategic partnerships with quite a few major powers, including US, Russia, Japan, Australia, and others. But France was the first major power with whom we established a strategic partnership back in 1998. So on the 25th anniversary, India-France are commemorating this event, and they have decided to further elevate this relationship. So in this context, let's take a detailed look at India-France relations. The topic is very, very relevant for your prelims and even for your mains. Let's begin with French colonial history, a brief introduction into the French presence in India, and then we'll talk about the post-independent relations that have developed between India and France. Because the colonial history is a part of our shared cultural heritage. France has left behind a deep imprint on India's history, India's culture, and even on the Indian Constitution. The French were one of the last European colonial powers to enter the Indian subcontinent. After the Dutch, the British, and the rest, finally, France made an entry into East India trade in the early part of 16th century. It was around the 16th, 17th century period that France started establishing its major presence across the Indian subcontinent. The first French factory came up at Surat in today's Gujarat in 1668, following a license that was issued by the then French monarch, King Henry. And the first batch of French traders landed at Surat, leading to the establishment of the French factory at Surat. From here onwards, the French sought the expansion of their trading presence in India. Initially, they didn't have territorial ambition. Their main goal was to tap the resources of India to ensure that a trading relationship is established between the Indian subcontinent and the then French monarchy. So after the first factory was established, the French became interested in expanding their trading presence, and very quickly they established trading posts and lodges across different parts of India. I'm sure you would have heard about French presence at Mosulipatnam, today's Machilipatnam, in Andhra Pradesh, in coastal Andhra, Chandranagore, in today's West Bengal. So these became the initial trading posts of the French, along with the presence of their factories. You can take a look at these locations in the map as well, which I've shared over here. There could be a map-based question in your prelims as well. So this is where the French made a presence initially, from Surat to Mosulipatnam to Chandranagore. Then the French started developing territorial ambitions. Now they were in direct competition with the British East India Trading Company. So the British sought the establishment of permanent colonies with territorial control. We saw the emergence of French colonies from Karaikal, which is part of Puducherry today, to Yanam, which is also part of the Union Territory of Puducherry. Right? So the French presence kept expanding, and especially under General Dupleix, the French ambition started to grow in the 1700s. The French ambition to establish a permanent territorial settlement grew stronger in the 1700s. This brought the French in direct conflict with the British. Under General Dupleix, with the French and Robert Clive on the side of the British, a conflict would begin between the British and the French for control over the Indian colony, the prized asset for European colonial powers. So the French would ally with local Indian rulers. For example, Dupleix would ally with the Nawab in Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dawla. He would ally with the Arcots and the Deccan Sultans, and as well as Chand Sahib. Right? The French would assist the local Indian kingdoms, from Battle of Plassey to the Carnatic Wars to even to the Anglo-Mysore Wars. But in most of these conflicts, the local Indian rulers would be defeated along with the French allies, and it conclusively established British dominance in the Indian subcontinent. So we saw a decline, a significant decline in French colonial power and presence. And in fact, most of their colonies, their forts were even destroyed by the British. It was only after a few peace treaties were signed between Britain and France that the French were allowed to retain a limited colonial presence at places like Pondicherry, which is today's Puducherry, and the other parts of Puducherry, which includes Mahe, Yanam, Karaikal, etc. But this limited French presence did establish a strong economic, cultural, and diplomatic relationship between India and France. Even during the World War, for example, Indian soldiers made a big contribution. They fought in French battlefields as well. And even today, you find memorials in France paying tribute to Indian soldiers who sacrificed their lives. France and India, they would maintain this close cultural contact. And if you ever visit Pondicherry or Puducherry today, you still come across that close cultural connection, the economic bonds that bind India and France. So obviously this has transitioned into post-independence relations as well. Even after India became independent, the French colonial presence remained for a few more years. One by one, the French territories were ceded into the Indian Union. Initially, some of the French lodges at Surat, Kozhikode, etc., they were shut, and these parts were ceded to the Union of India back in 1947 itself. Then by 1950, Machilipatnam, Chandrayaan, and all these French establishments were completely shut, and they were ceded into the Union of India. And then the areas of Pondicherry, Yanam, Karaikal, Mahe, they were all ceded into the Union of India, and by 1962, this transfer was ratified by France as well. So by 1962, French colonial rule completely came to an end, but without any discord, friendly relations started developing between India and France. Back in those days, when the world was gripped by the Cold War rivalry between the US-led power bloc and the Soviet-led power bloc, France continued to maintain cordial relations with India. It would assist India in several key domains, especially in high technology domains, such as the nuclear domain, the aerospace domain, and even in the defense domain. French defense companies would supply armaments and military hardware to India, but we did have some concerns about the French supplying the same equipment to Pakistan as well. So in the 60s and 70s, we did have these concerns that France was supplying the same military hardware to Pakistan as well, which was not seen as in favor of India. But apart from this minor hiccup, the relationship was very smooth, it progressed very well, and France continued to become a technology partner for India throughout 80s and 90s. In fact, in 1998, when India tested nuclear weapons at Pokhran, and when India violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? Most countries, they criticized India, they targeted India. Economic sanctions, technological sanctions were imposed on India because India had violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The United States and many other powers, including China, Japan, they all rallied together to condemn India's nuclear tests, and they levied strict economic and technological sanctions on India, which crippled the Indian economy, and even our defense and technology domain was crippled because we couldn't access readily available technology in the markets. But however, France was unique. France stood out from the rest. There were very few countries which did not condemn the nuclear tests of India, and France was one of them. Despite being a Western ally, a NATO member, a close ally of the US, France relied upon its independent foreign policy. France is known for its independent foreign policy in most circumstances, and along with Russia and Israel, these were the only three major countries which did not condemn India's nuclear tests in 1998. They didn't join the sanctions regime. So France, in a way, understood the need for India's nuclear weapons program. And from here onwards, the strategic partnership was established, and we have seen a flourishing of the relations between India and France. Now, let me just take you through some of the key landmark events and achievements that we have seen in India-France relationship, especially in the defense, security domain, counterterrorism, and as well as in the field of science and technology. Let's look at the progress the relationship has made and why this is one of the most critical relationships for India. France has been a very reliable partner, more reliable than even the United States. It's in this context that many strategic experts and even former Indian diplomats, they believe that France is a key friend of India, a reliable partner for India, not just at the UN Security Council, but even with regard to our bilateral ties, defense cooperation, France becomes a critical player for India in international relations. Don't forget, France is a permanent member. It has a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. So it's because of these reasons that France becomes a strategic partner for India, and even France gains with this strategic partnership from India. So let's look at the kind of developments that we have seen in the defense domain, because we share very, very close defense and military ties. The Indian Air Force operates a fleet of frontline fighter jets, the Mirage 2000, which we procured from France back in 80s and 90s. The Mirage, which is capable of even delivering nuclear weapons, is one of the mainstays of the Indian Air Force. And in fact, it was recently used during the Balkot airstrikes when Indian Air Force breached Pakistani airspace following Pulwama attacks and delivered precision strikes against terrorist camps at Balkot. Following the Mirage 2000, we have also procured the advanced Rafale fighter jets recently in a government-to-government deal, which has become the frontline fighter jets of the Indian Air Force. The Rafale jets, which have been delivered, they have been positioned in forward areas facing both Pakistan and China. Apart from this, France is a key partner with the Indian Navy under P75 program, Project 75. It's under this program that France has transferred the technology of the Scorpene conventional diesel-electric submarines. These French submarines are considered as one of the most advanced conventional diesel-electric submarines. Under P75, 6 submarines have been built indigenously by Mazgaon Dock Limited, and they have been inducted into the Indian Navy. Under the INS Kalvari class, 6 diesel-electric conventional submarines, which are based on the Scorpene designs of France, have been built, and this involves transfer of technology. This is not just a buyer-seller transactional relationship. France is sharing the technology with India, and we are domestically producing these submarines over the last few years. And now that they are being inducted, right, it boosts the maritime strength of the Indian Navy. Now we are currently considering a further expansion of the deal. India wants to procure 3 more Scorpene submarines and build them domestically in India with indigenous components. And we are also looking for the Rafale M, or the marine version of the fighter jets, for the Indian Navy, which is currently operating aircraft carriers. Because the MiG-29 of Russian Soviet origin, which we are using on the aircraft carriers, they are going to be outdated, they are going to be phased out very soon. So the replacement for that would be the Rafale M, the sea-based variant of the Rafale fighter jets. So these are the 2 other deals which are still in discussion mode. We are still negotiating the final cost, and this is why France becomes a critical defense partner for India. Even in the space domain, there is very close collaboration between the space agencies of both the countries. India's ISRO works closely with the CNES of France. We collaborate in satellite launches. For example, you might have heard about a European space company called Arianespace. It's a French company essentially. India's heaviest communication satellites, the GSAT series of satellites especially, right? They were launched primarily through Ariane space vehicles from the space station in South America, in French Guyana. Especially when India was still struggling with the GSLV heavy lift rockets, right? To lift these heavier communication satellites into orbit, we relied on European companies like Arianespace, and France has been a key partner in these satellite launches. ISRO and CNES, the national space agencies of both the countries, they have an upcoming joint mission, the Trishna satellite, which is an Earth observation satellite. The Earth observation satellite will have a number of civilian purposes, from mapping resources to disaster management to studying climate change. The satellite will benefit both India and France, and we are also collaborating in the domain of maritime surveillance by using satellites in the Indian Ocean. Because don't forget, France is a major Indian Ocean power. I will have a discussion on this as well. We'll understand the Indo-Pacific collaboration between India and France. So maritime surveillance has been a priority area for both the countries, and the space agencies are collaborating to serve a defense application to improve surveillance across the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean region. They're also collaborating to deal with the risk of collision of satellites with space debris. They're dealing with space debris management. So all these advanced areas of space technology has become an area of collaboration between India and France. In fact, France is even assisting India in the field of space medicine for the upcoming Gaganyaan mission. India's first manned space flight, which is currently under progress, right, requires advances in the field of space medicine to look after the health of the astronauts. And France is a key collaborator, and it's assisting India in the field of space medicine to ensure that Gaganyaan mission becomes a success. Then coming to the nuclear domain, civil nuclear energy. France has been a collaborator since many years, even before India tested nuclear weapons. But in the recent past, after the India-US nuclear deal, France became the next major power to sign a civil nuclear cooperation deal with India. It was signed back in 2009 itself, and the erstwhile French company Areva was looking to set up nuclear plants at Jaitapur in Maharashtra. So right now, this project is being taken over by another French nuclear company. The initiative is still underway, and France is still eager to set up civilian nuclear reactors in Maharashtra at Jaitapur to generate electricity. France has been consistently backing India to gain membership into the nuclear suppliers group. The NSG is an export control regime. Only the members of NSG can trade in nuclear materials and nuclear technology. Only they can engage in nuclear commerce. The US, which signed the first major nuclear deal with India in 2004-2005, granted an NSG exemption to India and promised support to India to ensure that India becomes a member of NSG without signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty is mandatory. It's a mandatory criteria to even apply for NSG membership. But the US granted an exemption recognizing India's responsible nuclear program, and France became the next country which signed a civil nuclear deal with India in 2009, and since then it has been consistently backing India's membership to the NSG. The only roadblock is China at the NSG. It's a 48-member grouping, but China is blocking India's entry. Because for India to gain entry into NSG, all the 48 countries have to support India's inclusion. 47 countries are giving exemption to India, including Japan. Japan, which has a very strict commitment on nuclear non-proliferation, right? Even Japan has withdrawn its hesitance, and it has supported India's entry into NSG without signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Because India's commitment is that we will never sign NPT, as it's a discriminatory treaty. NPT allows only few countries to retain their nuclear weapons, only the P5 countries, the 5 permanent members of UNSC. But for India, holding on to nuclear weapons is a strategic requirement. So that's the reason why India and even Pakistan, for that matter, and even Israel, they've rejected the Non-Proliferation Treaty as they look at it as a discriminatory regime. So US promised India membership into NSG without signing NPT, without compromising on India's national interests. France has backed this position, but China has held up India's membership to NSG. But the key point here is to understand that France is a key partner for India in the civil nuclear domain. Then coming to Indo-Pacific. Today, Indo-Pacific has become the global hotspot for all the big geopolitical developments. With the rise of China and rising tensions between US and China, Indo-Pacific has become the hub of geopolitics, and India has major interests to protect across the Indo-Pacific. So France is also a major player in the Indo-Pacific. Don't assume that France is just a European power. France is a major power in the Indo-Pacific because many of the island countries in the Indian Ocean, they were all French colonies. Even today, there are French overseas territories present in the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific. Several small Pacific islands were French colonies as well. Starting with Mauritius in the Indian Ocean, Madagascar, the French Reunion or La Reunion near East Africa, right? These island territories, they were French colonies at one point. And even today, French territories are present in the Indian Ocean and also in the Pacific. So French Navy is constantly deployed in the Indo-Pacific, and it's a priority for France as well to ensure that Indo-Pacific region is stable. France has issues with China, Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. France also is interested to maintain the rules-based international order. So it's only natural for India and France to come together in the Indo-Pacific, and this has become a major area of collaboration. In fact, France is also a member of important groupings like IORA, Indian Ocean Rim Association, which is led by India. India was one of the founding members of the IORA grouping, which is an important regional association of the Indian Ocean. France is a member here as well. Then we also have the Indian Ocean Commission, which is a grouping of few Indian Ocean island countries. 5 Indian Ocean island countries like Comoros, Madagascar, Mauritius, French Reunion and others, they are members of Indian Ocean Commission. And India and France have observer status. So through such important regional groupings and through increased naval presence across the Indo-Pacific, both India and France are collaborating to stabilize the Indo-Pacific. They are also assisting the small island nations in their economic development, in building a sustainable blue economy model. Then coming to counterterrorism, intelligence sharing, This is another key area of collaboration because India and France face similar threats. Various terrorist groups operating in the Afghanistan-Pakistan belt, from Lashkar-e-Toiba to Al-Qaeda, and even the Islamic State in the Iraq-Syria region. All these terror groups are a common threat to India and France, and we have very close cooperation in the field of counterterrorism. We even have joint military exercises between our armed forces. For example, please take a look at this. The Shakti exercise. It's a joint exercise between Indian Army and the French Army. It mainly focuses on counter-terrorist operations. Varuna is a naval exercise between Indian Navy and the French Navy. Garuda is an Air Force exercise between the Air Forces of India and France. So we have standalone bilateral military exercises. And recently, just 4 days back, we took part in a trilateral exercise called Desert Night, which was an air exercise involving India, France and UAE, which was conducted in the Arabian Sea. As Arabian Sea has been threatened by the Houthi rebels who have been firing missiles and drones at commercial ships, this has threatened the interests of multiple countries in the Arabian Sea region. So Indian Air Force, along with the Air Force of France and UAE, conducted a trilateral air exercise to establish their dominating presence in the Arabian Sea called Desert Night. So this is the kind of extensive military defense relations we have with France, along with strong intelligence counterterrorism relations. This extends to even the domain of critical technology, critical emerging technologies like supercomputing, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. These critical areas of science and technology, even that has become a focus area for India-France relations. Then even climate change. For example, if you look at the 2015 Paris Summit, which brought out the Paris Agreement, India-France collaborated very proactively in finalizing the Paris Agreement, and the International Solar Alliance, which has been a pet project of Prime Minister Modi, was backed by France, which was hosting that year's Climate Change Summit in 2015. So across sectors, there is close collaboration between India and France. So it's only natural for India-France to further elevate their strategic partnership. So following this recent visit of the French president, several key agreements have been signed. India-France have signed a roadmap for defense industrial collaboration. This has to be the biggest development during this visit of the French president to India. So please make a note of these recent developments as well. A roadmap for defense industrial partnership has been signed. It seeks to promote cooperation in defense production. So Indian and French defense institutions and companies will collaborate to jointly design, develop and produce military hardware for both the countries. So it's not just transfer of technology. It's not that France is developing the technology and giving it to India. This is better than that. This involves co-production, co-designing, co-development. That is, jointly India-France will design and develop and produce military hardware. So this could be a big boost for India's Atmanirbharata, to make India more self-reliant, to promote the Make in India initiative, and to promote indigenization of defense technology. This collaboration will extend to space, land warfare, artificial intelligence, and even cyberspace, to deal with the warfare and military aspects of outer space, cyberspace, AI-driven warfare, land-based warfare. Any military hardware developed in these domains, right, would involve joint collaboration between India and France in the field of robotics, autonomous vehicles, including drones and robotic transportation vehicles, and even cyber defense with regard to cyber warfare and cyber terrorism. So these military domains are becoming a priority. Apart from developing conventional military hardware, the two countries will focus on critical emerging technologies as well to prioritize the emerging domains of warfare. Outer space, cyberspace, they've already become the new dimensions of warfare. Now, AI is adding a new dimension. Autonomous vehicles are adding a new dimension to warfare. So in these critical technologies, defense technologies will be jointly developed by India and France under this roadmap for defense industrial partnership. It will essentially bring the defense industries of the two countries together. Apart from this, as I told you, we are pursuing two multi-billion-dollar deals, which is to procure Rafale M fighter jets for Indian Navy to be operated from the aircraft carriers, and 3 additional Scorpene submarines. But however, during the visit, these deals have not been finalized because still there are some issues with regard to the cost, the pricing, and these negotiations are still continuing. Now, apart from this, many other important agreements were signed during the visit. In the field of defense space partnership, with regard to militarization of outer space and the threat of space warfare, the Indian and the French defense ministries have agreed to collaborate on space situational awareness. Do you know that India has raised a dedicated unit for space-based warfare? Recently, India has set up the Defense Space Agency. It is a dedicated tri-service armed agency focusing on space-based warfare, and it's involved in developing space-based weapons, including anti-satellite weapons or ASAT weapons. So with regard to defense space partnership, the defense ministries of both countries will collaborate in the domain of space situational awareness to understand the hostile threats present in outer space. They have signed another agreement in the civilian space sector between New Space India Limited, which is one of the commercial arms of ISRO, and Ariane Space of France. An agreement has been signed for collaboration in satellite launches, as we were discussing earlier. Then finally, many other MOUs have been signed covering many other key sectors, including agriculture, education, digital health, etc. India's UPI payment interface and the digital payment gateways are being extended into France. During Prime Minister Modi's visit to France, this initiative was taken up, and now India and France are finalizing it. Very soon, India's UPI-based payments will start working in France. This will benefit traders, students, tourists, Indian workers in France. Education is an important area of collaboration because several Indian students study in French universities. There are many Indian professionals who work in France as well. So to look after their social security, to ensure their well-being, to ensure they have access to quality education and even adequate jobs in France, several agreements have been signed, and this signifies the overall breadth, the length and breadth of the India-France relationship. Apart from this, there is progress being seen with regard to developing a jet engine. India and France are looking towards joint development of a jet engine, and this is for the advanced medium combat aircraft, which is a 5th generation fighter jet being developed in India. The Aeronautical Development Agency ADA and HAL and other related agencies like the Gas Turbine Research Establishment. These aerospace agencies are developing a jet engine to power the 5th generation fighter jet, which is being indigenously designed in the country. It's tentatively named as AMCA, Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft. So this aircraft requires a powerful, reliable engine, and France has jet engine technology. This is a critical technology available only with few countries like US, France, etc. So DRDO is negotiating with Safran, which is a French aviation and aerospace company that manufactures jet engines. And there are discussions going on to jointly develop and produce a jet engine for the 5th generation fighter jet of India. This will be very similar to another jet engine deal that we have signed with the US. Recently, when PM Modi visited the United States, India-US signed a jet engine development and co-production deal between HAL of India and GE of the US, General Electric. So India-US are going to jointly produce the F414 engines to power the next variant of the light combat aircraft, the Tejas fighter jets. Because India's indigenous engine program, the Kaveri engine, this program crashed. The program couldn't succeed even after decades of effort and investments. So India has to rely on such foreign partners to procure jet engine technology. But at least domestic production with transfer of technology will give a boost. And we have one such deal with the US for F414 engines of GE from US. And we are pursuing a similar deal with France for the advanced medium combat aircraft. And finally, the last point, one big development to come out of the visit is collaboration in the civilian airspace domain. India and France are going to develop and produce a civilian helicopter This is a deal, it's a private deal between Airbus and the Tata Group. Tata Advanced Systems Limited, which is involved in the aerospace and defense sector, has signed a contract with Airbus to produce a civilian helicopter in India. Airbus helicopter is world renowned. This is the H125 helicopter. Please make a note, there can be a prelims question. The H125 helicopter, it's produced by Airbus, it's of French origin. It's one of the most reliable and most popular civilian helicopters in the world. It's a single engine helicopter, mainly used for transporting passengers. It's also used in search and rescue operations, for law enforcement, for medical evacuation, etc. It's a very versatile helicopter. It can operate even in high altitude conditions. It's the only helicopter to have landed at the peak of Mount Everest as well. So this will be domestically produced in India by the Tata Group, Tata Advanced Systems Limited. So this deal has been finalized, and this also involves transfer of technology. So this shows the depth of India-France relations and why France is one of the most reliable partners for India. Now let's move on to the next article from page number 7. This article talks about Indian laborers working in foreign countries and the risks that they face. See, the article actually deals with several points which is not necessary or relevant for the exam. But the issue that the article is highlighting is very important. So I will go beyond the scope of the article and have a detailed discussion on India's labor export. Given the manpower that we have, the human resource, the human capital that we have, right? We are a country of 1.4 billion people with the world's largest population. The Indian government is obviously looking at leveraging the human capital of India and exporting labor to other countries where it is required, where it is needed. So this is beneficial in many ways. It benefits the Indian economy, it benefits Indian workers, it solves many socio-economic problems in the country, right? It improves our ties with other friendly countries as well. But at the same time, there are many drawbacks. There are risks associated with export of labor, especially for the safety, well-being of the laborers themselves. So let us examine the issue by first understanding the context. Recently, Israel and India have signed a deal, and according to the deal, India's Ministry of Skill Development is going to export thousands of skilled Indian laborers to Israel because Israel is facing a critical shortage of cheap labor in the construction industry and also in the caregiving industry. Israel is dealing with an aging society. To look after the aging population, Israel relies upon foreign caregivers, nurses and paramedics, etc. So India can be a country which can supply caregivers for Israel. And in fact, many Indians from Kerala, Karnataka, they're already working in Israel, and it's because of the Gaza war that many of them have come back to India. But otherwise, Indian caregivers play a big role in Israel's healthcare industry by looking after their aging citizens. In the construction sector as well, Israel is facing a challenge. It's facing a shortage of labor. So skilled Indian workers, from plumbers to carpenters to electricians to those involved in construction work, right? They could contribute to Israel's economy, and a deal has been signed under which India will be facilitating the movement of thousands of Indian laborers who are trained, who are having the right skills into the Israeli market. So this is nothing but an export of labor. Just like a country exports goods and services, human capital, that is human labor, can also be exported. Now, on the back of it, there was another report which claimed that India and Taiwan are also looking at a similar agreement. This claim has been dismissed by the government of Taiwan as of now, but it's been widely reported in the media that India and Taiwan are looking to sign a deal under which 1 lakh Indian laborers will be sent to Taiwan, because Taiwan is also facing a critical problem. It has an aging population, just like most advanced economies. It is facing a critical shortage of labor across key sectors and industries, and it is looking to tap the manpower in other countries, the human resource from other countries. So this is where a report came up that India and Taiwan are looking to sign a deal. Even though Taiwan has dismissed it, it's still believed that India and Taiwan are working on such an arrangement so that 1 lakh Indian laborers can be sent to Taiwan. So it's in this context that I'm examining this topic of India's labor export to the world. And this is not something which is happening recently. India has been exporting human capital since many years, many decades. at least since a couple of centuries, Indian workers, Indian laborers have played a critical role in powering the economy of other countries. This story goes all the way back to 1800s, to the indentured labor system, the horrific indentured labor system that was introduced by the British. See, the British trading companies, including East India Trading Company, they relied primarily on African slaves to run their enterprises and their colonies, especially in Africa and in other colonies around the world. The British companies they brutally exploited the African people, right? They treated them as commodities. They traded them. They sold them as commodities in the slave markets. For example, on the island of Zanzibar, which today belongs to Tanzania, one of the world's biggest slave markets was created here by the British under the Sultanate of Oman with financing from Gujarati financiers. That was an evil nexus. Gujarati moneylenders and financiers funding the slave trade, with the British exploiting African slaves from the market, and this happened under the patronage of the Sultanate of Oman, which dominated these parts in 1800s. So since then, the British, they kept exploiting African slaves across colonies, and finally this became a sensitive human rights issue. In early 1800s, the British Parliament abolished African slavery. A law was enacted by the British Parliament because there was an awakening amongst the British society that slavery is evil. And to end this practice, a law was enacted by the British Parliament abolishing African slavery. So this was a big hit for British enterprises, for British colonial companies. Now, who will look after their farms, their plantations, their factories? Who will help them run their colonies and execute their projects? So this is where they came up with a new labor system called the indentured labor system, and this time they exploited Indians. They simply replaced African slavery with Indian indentured labor system. This was essentially a contract-based labor system. It appeared to be a benevolent initiative to provide employment to Indians, but it was nothing but bonded labor. It was nothing but slavery in a different form. In fact, the British would even refer to Indian laborers as coolies, thus popularizing the term. In fact, if you have read a very popular fictional book by Amitav Ghosh, The Sea of Poppies, he refers to the horrors suffered by Indian indentured laborers who were treated as coolies by the British in their colonies around the world. If you have ever wondered why in the West Indies cricket team there are so many cricketers with an Indian name, if you have ever wondered why there is such a strong Hindu community in Mauritius, so big that more than half of its population today is of Indian descent. Recently, when the Ram temple was consecrated, right, Mauritius had declared a half-day holiday for government employees. So there must be some reason which binds them with India, and this is nothing but the indentured labor system. So under this system, Indians were transported by the British to their colonies around the world. So this was an export of Indian labor, right? In many cases, Indian families, they were duped. They were they were given false promises. The British promised them a better life, a better pay, and they promised them to bring them back after a certain period of time. This was a contract-based labor. But in many cases, this was based on deception, lies. So they transported entire families from the Madras province, from today's UP and Bihar, and you find these communities spread across the world today. You go to the Caribbean region, which we call as the West Indies, go to Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, you find a very strong Indian community. The Hindi and Bhojpuri languages are spoken, Hindu festivals are celebrated, Indian food is widely popular in the Caribbean. That's because there is a lasting legacy that has been left behind by the indentured labor system. You go to South American countries like Guyana, which today is locked in a border dispute with Venezuela. You go to Suriname in South America. There's a very strong presence of the Indian community. The current generation, they are descendants of Indian laborers who were transported. You go to faraway island nations like Fiji in the South Pacific, right? In Fiji as well, you have a very strong Indian community, right? Following Indian customs, speaking Indian languages. And this is mainly because of the indentured labor system. So they were transported from Pacific to the Caribbean, from Southeast Asia to Africa, especially in East Africa and South Africa, from Kenya to Tanzania to South Africa. You find a very strong Indian presence. Mauritius was the first country to receive the first batch of Indian indentured laborers. This is where the British used Indian laborers to run their sugar plantations. Mauritius is known for its sugar cultivation. That was a prime enterprise for the British colonial companies. So this is how India was forced to export human capital, export labor under the British indentured labor system. It led to large-scale violation of human rights. In most cases, they were not brought back because these were far away islands. There was no way for these families to come back. Once they would dump them on these islands, they wouldn't pay them proper salaries. Their living conditions would be horrible, right? Essentially, this was bonded labor and slavery in a different form. So these horrors suffered by Indians back then, it has been well documented. So there are many risks that arise out of such export of human capital. There could be a direct threat to the safety and well-being of these laborers who are being transported to other countries. But however, there can be advantages as well. I'm not just criticizing it. There is an advantage that comes many decades later. Today, India has a significant diplomatic pull and influence across these countries because of the strong Indian diaspora present in these countries. Essentially, they provide soft power influence. They promote our culture. They act as cultural ambassadors of India, and the Indian government leverages this in its foreign policy, from Fiji to the Caribbean to South America to Africa. Right? It's become a key part of our diplomacy. We leverage the soft power connect, the cultural, historical connect with the Indian community. They contribute to Indian foreign policy. They would still have family members back in India, and they send back money, which we call as remittances. These remittances, the inward bound remittances, are crucial for the Indian economy. And post-independence, we have continued the export of labor or human capital from India primarily because of this reason. In the 1970s, when the oil market boomed in West Asia, India actively promoted the export of human capital, especially from Kerala to the Gulf. It became a stereotype that every Mallu family or every family from Kerala would have workers in the Gulf, right? Now, this is not just limited to Kerala. There are workers from across the country, from UP to Bihar. They have become the biggest contributors of migrant labor today. Even Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and many other states. So the plus side is that the advantage is that those who are not getting employment in India, because India is still a developing nation, there are lack of employment opportunities, the pay in India is not adequate. So those who go abroad with their skills, even if they're taking up a blue-collar job with a semi-skilled profession, still they will earn significant amount of money, which is very much essential to uplift their families. And the money they send back, the remittances they send back, became crucial over the years to balance the BOP, balance of payments, to keep our current account deficit under check. So we have seen the export of India's human capital to many other jurisdictions, to many other territories. You look at Southeast Asia, for example, from Malaysia to Singapore to Thailand. There are several Indian workers who are semi-skilled, who are in the blue-collar category. I'm not just talking about the highly skilled Indian professionals. I'm not talking about Indian engineers, doctors, lawyers, etc. I'm talking about the blue-collared workers with basic skills who work in construction, hospitality, right, and sectors such as these. In Africa as well, there is a strong Indian community today. It's no longer just Gujarati traders and financiers in Africa, but there are a number of Indian semi-skilled laborers working across African countries. So this presents both an opportunity and a crisis. For example, recently, you might remember what happened in Sudan. Sudan descended into a civil war last year, and several members of Haki-Piki tribe from Karnataka were trapped, and they had to be rescued. They had to be evacuated by the Indian government under Operation Kaveri. Now, why did members of Haki-Piki tribe from Karnataka, why did they go all the way to Sudan? That's because they were trying to sell their herbal medicines. The Haki-Piki tribe is a traditional tribe, indigenous forest-dwelling tribe. So they have some traditional knowledge regarding herbal medicine. And this has huge popularity in the global market. And members of the tribe, they try to move to other countries to sell their products. Right? And eventually, they might get caught in such conflict situations. They might get caught in a country where a war has broken out or a civil war has broken out. We have seen this happening repeatedly. Indians have been trapped in Yemen, in Libya, in Lebanon, and more recently in Israel and Gaza when the Gaza war broke out. So definitely there are risks to their safety and well-being. There is a risk to their life. There is a risk to their economic well-being. They're disconnected from their families. This could lead to many social problems back home in India. But at the same time, there are advantages as well. It brings soft power influence to India. It increases the strength of the Indian community abroad. And we could leverage them to influence foreign governments and their policies towards India as well. Plus, they send back remittances, right? Which is crucial to bridge our current account deficit. Did you know that today, India is the world's biggest recipient of remittances? We are getting more than $100 billion in the last 2 years. India has even overtaken China. And we are consistently getting more than $100 billion, which has become crucial for the Indian economy to balance the BOP and achieve a manageable current account deficit. Plus, we have skilled Indian labor exploring markets like US, Europe, and other advanced economies. I'm talking about professionals, those who are in white-collar jobs, from engineers to doctors. Plus, there are many others with basic skills and those who are semi-skilled who also seek out opportunities. And when they get desperate, when they don't get a legal opportunity to work in their country, they try to go as illegal migrants. This is the reason why illegal migration from India has increased exponentially in the last few years. To realize the American dream, to make it big in a foreign country, right? It's a social status back home in India. So illegal migrants from Gujarat and Punjab in particular have tried to enter these advanced economies on a very large scale. Just the last year, US has arrested almost 96,000 Indian illegal migrants. Can you imagine that number? 96,000 Indian illegal migrants. Many European countries are facing the same problem. So since the government itself is encouraging the export of human capital, those who cannot make it legally, those who can't get a valid visa to work in another country, they'll get desperate and they might try to opt for the illegal route where there is a risk for their life. I'm sure many of you would have seen the latest movie, Donkey as well, which explores the donkey route that many illegal migrants take from India to US and other countries. The risky route where they put their lives at risk. So definitely there are advantages. You get remittances, you gain soft power influence, but the cost is paid by these workers, especially the semi-literate, semi-skilled laborers who are finding blue-collar jobs. Those who are working in the oil industry, construction industry, right? Hospitality, caregiving. They are the sufferers because there is a direct risk to their health, their safety and well-being in foreign countries. In the Gulf, for example, there are many cases where blue-collar workers from India have been exploited. The employers, they snatch their passports. Sometimes they're duped by the middlemen, right? In the name of getting them a passport or a visa or employment, middlemen dupe them. And even if they manage to land a job, right, the employers will exploit them. Their living conditions have been pathetic. They're not given proper salaries. They're abused, exploited, and sometimes sexually exploited and molested as well. So this is the risk faced by Indian laborers abroad, and this is where the topic has to be examined in detail. The article essentially is pointing out the risks. Yes, there are advantages to exporting human capital, the labor capital of India, but the government should be mindful of the risks because we have seen many such incidents. So this is a debatable topic, and I think it's a very important issue as well for even a possible essay. Now coming to the final big article, from page number 6, we have an editorial that refers to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Here I will just provide you the gist of the editorial because I'm sure you would have heard enough about Russia-Ukraine war. So I'll not dive into the details. It won't be necessary. I would just want to give you an update on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict and what is the stand of the editorial. What is the issue the editorial is highlighting? The editorial says that the Russia-Ukraine war has become an endless war. In 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, primarily based on the premise that Ukraine was about to join NATO and it was getting closer to Western countries, especially the United States. So to protect its interests, Russia invaded Ukraine, resulting in the ongoing conflict. However, Russia has suffered major setbacks as Ukraine received a lot of support from the West, from the NATO. It got billions of dollars in funding, advanced weapons were supplied, intelligence was supplied. So Ukraine was able to resist the Russian invasion and fought back quite effectively, pushing back the Russian invasion. So right now the war has hit a stalemate. But Russia has tried to pick up momentum. It has mobilized more men to join the armed forces. It has been mobilizing foreign private mercenaries as well. It's recruiting from poor developing nations to increase the manpower, and it has deployed weapons procured from Iran, North Korea to gain momentum in this conflict. And Ukraine has retaliated with Western weapons, and it has been launching attacks against Russian cities and critical installations of Russia to strike back at Russia. So right now the conflict rages along the border areas along eastern Ukraine, but it's more or less a stalemate. In some places Russia is making progress, in some places Ukraine is trying to gain momentum. So just a few days back there was a disastrous incident, a tragedy, where a Russian military transport plane carrying almost 70 prisoners of war, it was shot down, and Russia is blaming Ukraine for it and Ukraine is blaming Russia for it. The usual blame game has begun. But eventually it's humanity which suffers in any such conflict. So the article here, the editorial, is highlighting how Ukraine may not be able to win this war. Because for Ukraine, winning this conflict would mean taking back the areas, the territories that Russia has captured. From the Donbas region, right, to several parts of eastern southern Ukraine, they have come under Russian occupation. Of course, this is illegal under international law. It's a violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, but that is the reality on the ground. Russia is already in occupation of these Ukrainian territories. For Ukraine to win the conflict, it has to regain those territories back. But this Ukrainian fight back is entirely dependent on support from the West and the NATO. Ukraine could even stand up to Russia and fight back mainly because of the funds and the weapons that it was receiving from the West and the NATO. But now, the Western countries and NATO are distracted by the Gaza war. They have been preoccupied with backing Israel in the Gaza war. US and other NATO allies have been pumping weapons into Israel to boost Israel's war in Gaza against Hamas. So this distraction of the West has reduced their focus on the Ukraine conflict. So Ukraine is worried. Also, don't forget, US is heading towards elections, and there is every possibility that Donald Trump might return back as the president. And if that were the case, he will completely stop support for Ukraine, and he has already made that promise as part of his presidential campaign. So the editorial is saying that this right now is an endless war. It's like a stalemate situation where neither side will win and the conflict will continue, and only humans on both the sides, civilians on both the sides, will continue to pay the price. That is why the editorial is calling upon all the stakeholders to apply reason, to apply rationality, and achieve a settlement of this conflict. So it's urging Russia, US, the NATO, and Ukraine to get together to find a solution, at least a temporary solution, to end this conflict for the time being. So that is the gist of this editorial. So this completes my detailed discussion of all the mains related articles. Now let's take a quick look at the smaller articles that are relevant for prelims. We have an article on page number 1 that refers to Aadhaar. Aadhaar, as you know, is a unique identification document which is issued by the Unique Identification Authority of India. It's a 12-digit unique code assigned to every Indian resident. Right? It's available not just to Indian citizens, it's available to foreigners as well if they are a resident of India, meaning if they are living in India for more than 180 days, for more than 6 months, even a foreigner can apply for Aadhaar and get a unique Aadhaar identification. Now, the UIDAI has clarified that Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship, it's not a proof for date of birth. This is very important. The new Aadhaar cards which are being issued, even the PDF document which is issued by UIDAI, it is clearly mentioning, there is a disclaimer added at the bottom, that this is just a proof of identity. Aadhaar was always designed as a proof of identity. It was envisioned as a proof of identity. It was never a proof of citizenship. It was never a proof for date of birth. Is that clear? Now this has implications for various government services being delivered. See, Aadhaar was introduced primarily to ensure that targeted services of delivery can be enabled. government subsidies can reach the intended beneficiaries without any leakage. Right? Farmers, students, and those who receive government support, right? They could directly get that funds into their bank accounts through this unique identification system. Various government services, schemes, and programs, welfare schemes, could be implemented with better efficiency through unique identification. So the primary purpose of Aadhaar was to serve as a proof of identity. It's just an identity document. But it's not a proof of citizenship. It never was to begin with, because it is given even to foreigners as well who are residents of India, who are living in India for more than 180 days. So please remember this. Many have a misconception that just because they have Aadhaar, it's a proof of citizenship. It's not. All right. So going forward, government departments, organizations, and other private companies which were taking this document as a proof of citizenship, they will stop doing it. And this is also not a proof of your date of birth. For that, it's your birth certificate, which is your proof for your birth date. So various government organizations, departments, which ask for documentation for your date of birth, right? They will not accept Aadhaar. Aadhaar is only for proof of identity, that you are the right person, you are the right beneficiary. To prove your date of birth, you need your passport or your birth certificate. Is that clear? So this has been made very clear by UIDAI, and it clears the misconception. So going forward, any agency or any institution or entity, government or private, whoever was using Aadhaar for verification, they should just use this as a proof of identity, not as a proof of citizenship, and definitely not as proof of birth date. Next, on the same page, we have an article that mentions that the rare golden tiger has been spotted in the Kaziranga National Park in Assam. You can see here, it's been photographed for the first time in India. The golden tiger has a very unique, distinct appearance. The golden tiger is not a different species. It's not a subspecies of tiger. It's not a different species. It's your regular Royal Bengal tiger. Its appearance is different because the black stripes are missing. It appears more orangish golden, right? The orange golden color stands out because these tigers, they have a genetic mutation. There is a genetic variation in a recessive gene, which is related to melanoma or the display of skin pigment, right? And even the hair color. So this recessive gene found in few tigers causes this condition, right? Where the black stripes are almost entirely missing. Tigers are known for their black and white stripes on an orange coat. That's how a normal tiger looks like, right? It primarily has an orange coat with prominent white and black stripes. But in case of a golden tiger, the black stripes are missing. So the orange and the white stands out, giving it this goldenish color. So these tigers are called golden tigers. So please note that it's not a different subspecies. It's just the Bengal tiger itself, but it has gone through a genetic variation, a genetic mutation of a recessive gene that leads to this abnormality. Recently, a pseudo-melanistic tiger was also spotted in Odisha in the Simlipal Tiger Reserve. You might have seen these pictures. It took social media by storm. It went viral. These are called the black tigers, where the melanin content is higher in these tigers. It's again not a subspecies. It's because of a genetic mutation. The black stripes are very prominent. Is that clear? So giving it a blackish appearance. So these are pseudo-melanistic tigers, which are partially black in color. It was spotted recently in Simlipal Tiger Reserve in Odisha. It's very similar to a black panther, which is basically a melanistic leopard or a jaguar, right? So it's not a subspecies. It's not a distinct species as such. It's just a result of a genetic mutation. All right. Then coming to Kaziranga, it's one of the most important protected areas in the country. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's an important bird area recognized by BirdLife International. It is home to many threatened species, including the one-horned Indian rhinoceros. It's also home to tigers and elephants. It's a critical habitat, and the Brahmaputra River floods through the Kaziranga National Park, and it's also a tiger reserve and a Project Tiger. So these basic facts about Kaziranga could also be important for your prelims. Next, on page number 8, there's a very small article referring to a legendary freedom fighter, V.O.Chidambaram Pillai. I feel his story is quite remarkable, and this could always be relevant for prelims under modern history. So who was V.O.Chidambaram Pillai? V.O.Chidambaram Pillai, born in 1872, passed away in 1936, is a legendary freedom fighter who participated in India's freedom struggle. But his real contribution for which he stood out was his establishment of a Indian-owned shipping company to challenge the British. He was heavily inspired by the Swadeshi movement. He was inspired by the ideals of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai. And when partition of Bengal happened in 1905, the Swadeshi boycott movement broke out. And V.O.Chidambaram Pillai was leading the movement in the Madras province. So in 1906, he established the Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company. This was to directly challenge the monopoly of the British India Steam Navigation Company. Because the British colonial rule was all about maritime dominance, right? Britain's control over India and its exploitation of the Indian economy and resources was primarily because it dominated the maritime route. British companies ran the ships that carried the goods from India to Europe and the finished goods back from Europe to India. So V.O.Chidambaram Pillai was one of the first Indians, private Indian individual, to challenge this British monopoly by setting up an indigenous shipping company called the Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company. So there can be a question on this. It was established in 1906, right? And this company opened India's first indigenous shipping route from Tuticorin in today's Tamil Nadu to Sri Lanka, to Colombo. Until then, only British ships were running this route, transporting spices and tea and Indian indentured workers to Sri Lanka. So this monopoly of the British was challenged by the Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company set up by V.O.Chidambaram Pillai. Today, the Tuticorin port in Tamil Nadu, which is a major port in India, it is named after V.O.Chidambaram Pillai. Please remember this fact as well. He became a member of the Indian National Congress. He was very active in India's freedom struggle, and at one point he developed ideological differences with Mahatma Gandhi. Because of these ideological differences, he quit the Indian National Congress as well, and he was even charged with the British under sedition charges and imprisoned. Finally, he lost his life in 1936, and when he passed away, he was living in abject poverty. So it's a remarkable story of this freedom fighter. So I think it's a very important topic for your prelims. So coming to this article on page number 12, which is related to science and technology, the article says that Japan's recent lunar mission benefited from India's Chandrayaan. Japan recently launched the SLIM spacecraft, the smart lander for investigating moon. Just a few days back, Japan became the 5th country after US, Russia, China, India. Japan became the 5th nation to achieve a soft landing on the lunar surface. Just like India's Chandrayaan 3 mission, even Japan was aiming for the south pole of the moon, and it achieved a partially successful landing. It's being called a partially successful landing because even though the SLIM spacecraft has touched down with pinpoint accuracy, the problem is the solar panels have not deployed, and Japan has detected that one of the engines failed during the descent phase. So it's only seen as a partial success. But however, the SLIM mission is remarkable. It holds great significance for India and Japan, because the SLIM mission adopted a unique trajectory while it was heading towards the lunar orbit. It used a very unique trajectory to save fuel, and it's a very lightweight spacecraft, meaning we can carry out more lunar missions in the future and with very limited costs, with very limited investments. So as the lunar race is heating up, India and Japan are actually collaborating for a future mission. We have a joint ISRO-JAXA mission coming up. JAXA is the aerospace agency of Japan, just like we have ISRO. So ISRO and JAXA are collaborating on an upcoming lunar mission, and the SLIM mission was critical because of the trajectory that it followed towards reaching the lunar orbit. Is that clear? Now, can you tell me the name of this upcoming lunar mission between ISRO and JAXA? Mention the name in the comments below. So according to this article, the SLIM lander, which made a landing finally, it relied upon India's Chandrayaan mission and the data generated by Chandrayaan 2. Even though Chandrayaan 2 landing mission was a failure for India, the orbiter, which is still in orbit, it had captured high-resolution images of the lunar surface. These images were used by the SLIM lander while identifying obstacles on the ground while executing a precision landing. Because all the other countries which have carried out a soft landing, they used a very big target area while landing. Be it US, India, even Russia and China, the identified target area to land was very big. It was quite a few square meters or square kilometers. Their target was to land in any one of these sites. But Japan had set a very precise target of just a few square meters. Hardly a 10 by 10 area was selected very specifically. And this site selection was done by using maps generated by the Chandrayaan 2 orbiter. Even when the SLIM mission was in its final descent, when it was just 50 to 100 meters from the lunar surface, when it was about to execute the final landing, it relied upon the images generated by India, by ISRO's Chandrayaan 2 orbiter, to identify the obstacles and avoid them to carry out a safe landing. So this already shows the close collaboration between ISRO and JAXA with regard to lunar mission. Right? There is already a similarity, a connection between the SLIM mission and the Chandrayaan mission. So going forward, we have a joint mission plan which is coming up in a couple of years. So please find out the name of the mission and mention that in the comments below. Now coming to the last article, it's more of an update. 2 days ago, we studied about the Genocide Convention, how South Africa has alleged that Israel is committing a genocide against Palestinians, and it has filed a case at International Court of Justice. We even studied the role, the composition of ICJ. So now the ICJ has passed an interim ruling. See, it will take many years or months for ICJ to decide whether Israel is committing a genocide, because this will involve a lot of hearings, evidence presented by both the parties. So it will take a longer time to decide whether Israel has committed or is it committing genocide against Palestinians. But however, ICJ has issued an interim ruling that Israel should avoid any measures that could lead to genocidal acts. Because right now, Israel is accused of blocking humanitarian aid to Palestinian people in Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is completely blockaded. It's become a closed enclave. Israel has blocked supply of food, water and medicines. It has blocked international aid agencies from reaching the Palestinians. So this was highlighted by South Africa, which is arguing that Israel is committing genocide already. And ICJ has issued an interim ruling that Israel should avoid. It should take all possible measures to prevent genocidal acts. But however, ICJ has not ordered for a ceasefire. Is that clear? It has not asked for a ceasefire, which means Israel will continue the war. But however, it has given a warning to Israel that don't use disproportionate force and allow humanitarian aid to be provided. Allow for medicines, food and water to be supplied so that civilians who are struggling can be saved. Now, these orders of ICJ is very significant because the ruling of ICJ is legally binding. Countries can't simply ignore or dismiss this. Every UN member state which has signed and ratified the UN Charter, they're all obligated by the rulings of the International Court of Justice. It's the primary judicial organ of the UN, and the orders of ICJ are legally binding on the UN member states. So it would be interesting to see what Israel would do. Of course, Israel has criticized the ruling. It has denied any allegations of genocide. It has only said that it's acting in defense. It was Hamas which carried out a genocide against Israelis, and now Israel is just retaliating against Hamas. But however, the fact is that Israel's war against Hamas has a huge price which is being paid by Palestinian civilians. More than 24,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed, and this amounts to disproportionate use of force. Israel has even blocked the delivery of humanitarian aid, food, water and medical supplies, which accounts for genocidal acts under the Genocide Convention. So that is why ICJ has intervened for the time being, asking Israel to not commit any acts or to not take up any measures that could lead to genocidal acts. So this completes my detailed analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. I hope you guys have liked it. If you did, do let me know in the comments, press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now before we end, please take a look at the mains practice questions. France has been one of India's most reliable strategic partners. Examine in detail with a brief history of India-France relations. Evaluate the contribution of India's labour export economy since the days of the British till date, and also shed light on the risks faced by Indian workers abroad. So these are the 2 questions based on what we have covered. I expect you to write an answer and post them in the comment section below. So that is it for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.